Priscilla Presley thought she'd already uncovered every secret from Elvis's final days, until she found a plane ticket dated August 17, 1977, one day after he passed. And the destination? It wasn't Graceland or Vegas or any place she expected. What she discovered changed everything she believed about his final hours. The box was heavier than it looked. Priscilla brushed the dust from the top, reading the faded marker, Elvis, Personal. It was January 1994, inside the windowless inventory room beneath Graceland. The air was cold and still. Old amps, tour jackets, and unopened crates lined the walls like forgotten pieces of another lifetime. A soft hum from the ceiling lights echoed in the background, almost like the distant murmur of a crowd waiting for Elvis to appear. She was there for a simple audit. At least that's what she thought. Inside the box were the usual things. A few scarves he tossed to fans, a cracked pair of aviators, an old Bible with margin notes. But near the bottom, under a stack of unopened letters, she spotted a thin manila envelope. No date, no label, just Elvis's handwriting on the seal. Her breath caught. She hadn't seen that handwriting in years. When she opened it, a brittle piece of paper slid into her palm. The edges were yellowed, the ink faint. But the name printed on it was unmistakable, Presley Elvis A. The room felt smaller, quieter. It was a flight ticket. She leaned closer, reading every line like it might vanish if she blinked. American Airlines, Memphis departure, August 17, 1977. One day after he died. Her hand trembled. The lights buzzed softly. The paper felt cold. Why would Elvis book a flight for a day he never lived to see? What was he planning that he hadn't told anyone? Not even her. She sat down on a wooden crate, the air pressing in around her. A strange ache rose in her chest, the same one she felt in August 77 when Memphis fell silent and tens of thousands lined the gates. She remembered the stillness of that day, the distant sobs, the candles flickering in the summer heat. Now, almost 2 decades later, she was staring at a clue he left behind without meaning to. She turned the ticket over. There was a faint watermark from the airline, a corner bent where someone, maybe Elvis, had held it between their fingers. Every part of her wanted to believe this was a mistake, some clerical mix-up. But his name, his date, his departure code, they were all too real. She looked again at the envelope. It had been sealed for years, maybe decades. Nobody had touched it. Nobody had moved it. It had been waiting silently for her to find it. One quiet question slipped into her mind, a question anyone might ask in her place. How well do we truly know someone, even someone we loved for years? She pressed her thumb along the edges of the ticket, tracing the printed numbers, trying to feel what Elvis might have felt when he booked it. Was he excited, nervous, hopeful, afraid? A cold truth washed over her. She had no idea where he was planning to go. But as she leaned closer, tilting the ticket under the fluorescent lights, the blurred text slowly sharpened. And that's when she saw it, the part that made her heart stop completely. The destination printed on that ticket was the real shock. Priscilla held her breath as she lifted the ticket closer to the light. The destination line was faint, but readable. Santa Fe Municipal Airport. She blinked twice, convinced she was seeing it wrong. Santa Fe? Elvis never mentioned Santa Fe in his late life plans. Not once. His world in 1977 revolved around Memphis, Los Angeles, the Vegas stage, and a few comfort spots he visited when he needed peace. But New Mexico? That wasn't on any list. The room felt suddenly colder. She whispered the words under her breath, testing the sound of them, like they belonged to someone else's life. Santa Fe Municipal. It made no sense. Not for Elvis. Not in August 77. Not with how fragile he was. A quiet question rose in her mind, the kind that digs straight into a person's chest. Why would a global legend book a flight to a quiet city where no one expected him, and no one would recognize him? She needed answers. And she knew the one person who might remember something, even if he didn't realize it at the time. Charlie Hajj. One of Elvis's closest friends, almost family. He'd been on stage with Elvis countless nights, handing him scarves, tuning guitars, reading the room when Elvis couldn't. Charlie remembered everything. At least he usually did. She called him that night. The phone crackled softly, like an old bootleg recording. "Charlie, I found something." There was a long pause. A pause that felt like 20 years collapsing in on itself. When she mentioned the ticket, Charlie didn't sound confused. He sounded startled. "Santa Fe?" he muttered almost to himself. Lord. He really kept that quiet. Priscilla felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean? Quiet about what?" Charlie sighed. The kind of tired sigh that comes when memory and regret meet in the same place. "I only saw one thing back in July," he said. "Elvis was reading this little brochure. Nothing fancy, just a fold-out pamphlet. I remember because it had this picture of a forest trail and some art museum. He said he needed somewhere quiet, out west. But I thought he was just browsing. You know how he was." Priscilla didn't answer. Her heartbeat filled the silence between them. Elvis wasn't the type to browse places he didn't care about. Not in 1977. Not with his schedule. Not with his state of mind. "What kind of brochure was it?" she asked. "I don't remember all of it," Charlie said. "But I do remember this turquoise border around the edges. Real southwestern look. And there was something else too. Something I never told anyone." The room seemed to close in on her. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Charlie's voice softened. "One day, when I walked into his room, he was holding a letter. Handwritten. The kind people used before the world got loud. It had a little turquoise stone taped to the corner. Real one. Looked like jewelry." Priscilla felt a sting of cold run down her arms. "Elvis told me it was personal business," Charlie continued. "Said it wasn't for the guys. Then he put it inside his Bible. I didn't ask again." A strange ache grew behind her ribs. Elvis keeping secrets wasn't new. But Elvis keeping a destination, a letter, and a flight hidden from everyone, even in his final weeks, felt like a puzzle missing its darkest pieces. "What was in the letter?" she asked quietly. Charlie exhaled. "I never knew. He didn't share it. But he looked worried that day. Worried and maybe hopeful? I can't explain it." Priscilla pressed her forehead into her hand. Hope and worry, both in the same heartbeat. It sounded exactly like Elvis in 1977. A question echoed through her mind, soft and painful. What was he preparing for that he couldn't tell her? And why Santa Fe? Charlie hesitated, then said the words that would shake her deeper than the destination itself. "There's something I need to admit. Something I should have told you years ago." The line went dead silent. And in that silence, Priscilla felt the ground shift beneath her. Because whatever Charlie remembered, whatever he had buried, wasn't small. It wasn't harmless. It was something that pointed straight toward the truth Elvis never got to reveal. Charlie then reveals a detail that shakes Priscilla to her core. Charlie didn't speak at first. All Priscilla heard was the quiet hum of the phone line, like the soft hiss of an old tape left running. She waited, gripping the ticket in her hand, feeling the weight of it settle deeper and deeper into her chest. Finally, Charlie exhaled. "There was someone in Santa Fe who wrote to him," he said. "Someone he didn't want anyone to know about." Priscilla froze, not because she feared some hidden romance. Those old rumors never impressed her, but because Elvis had rarely kept emotional secrets from her. Even in their hardest years, he trusted her with his worries, his nightmares, the soft parts of himself that fame tried to bury. "Who?" she whispered. "I don't know the name," Charlie replied. "All I saw was the letter. And the stone." Priscilla closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost see it. Elvis sitting on the edge of his bed at Graceland, turning the turquoise stone between his fingers while the house slept around him. The hallways quiet, the walls humming with old songs. His Bible resting on his lap like a barrier between the man the world saw and the man he was becoming. Charlie cleared his throat. Elvis didn't say much about it, just that he had unfinished business in New Mexico. The words landed like a punch. Unfinished business. The phrase wasn't dramatic. It wasn't poetic. It was simple, raw, and painfully real, The way people talk when they're trying to hold themselves together. What kind of business? Priscilla asked. That's the thing, Charlie said. I didn't know then, but I remember something else now. Something I pushed out of my mind. The tension built again. Slow, heavy, like a crowd holding its breath before the stage lights rise. Charlie continued. A few days before he died, maybe 2, maybe 3, I saw him writing in his journal. He kept stopping, looking at that same letter, then writing again. When I asked if he was okay, he said, "Some promises follow you, even when you try to outrun them." Priscilla felt her heart twist. She had read many of his journals over the years, but she had never heard this line. Never heard anything about promises or Santa Fe or turquoise stones. Elvis wrote stories, lyrics, wishes he never said aloud. But this sounded like something deeper, something he couldn't escape. Did he say anything else? She asked. Charlie hesitated. Just that he was thinking about going. To Santa Fe? She asked. Yes, he didn't say when, but he looked sure. He looked ready. A long silence filled the line. The kind of silence that pushes questions to the surface whether you want them or not. Why Santa Fe? What was waiting for him there? Who was writing to him so late in his life? Priscilla got up from her seat in the archive room. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her. A stack of his old jackets leaned against the wall, their rhinestones catching soft glints of light, almost like they were listening. Charlie, you said the letter had a turquoise stone, she said. Do you remember anything else about it? Anything at all? Charlie paused. A little symbol, he said, drawn in the corner. Looked like a lightning bolt. Not the TCB one. Different. Thinner. More traditional. Traditional. Her breath hitched. Native? She asked. Yeah, Charlie replied. That's what it looked like. Some kind of blessing mark. Priscilla closed her eyes. She remembered something. A road trip they took in 1968, before the comeback special, before the world tried to claim every part of him again. Elvis had visited a small trading post in New Mexico. He bought a few trinkets, talked to locals for hours, asked questions about symbols, healing, protection. He said the desert felt like a place where a man can breathe. Was this connected to that? Had Elvis reached back into some old memory, some moment of peace, during his darkest year? A soft ache pulsed through her chest. Why do people go back to old places when they're hurting? Maybe because those places remember them in ways others don't. Priscilla turned toward the box again. And then she saw something she had missed earlier. A folded sheet tucked against the side of the container. She pulled it out slowly. It was one of Elvis's journals. The leather cover worn. The corners stiff. She opened it carefully. Halfway down the page, dated July 29, 1977, she saw the words, New Mexico. Promises not kept. Time to finish what I started. Her throat tightened. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't random. Elvis had been planning something. Something quiet. Something personal. Something he wanted to face alone. But as she turned to the next page, her breath caught. Because tucked right beside that journal was something stranger. Something she didn't expect. Something that made the room feel suddenly colder. Stored next to that journal was something even stranger. The object lying beside the journal didn't belong in a dusty archive box. Not after all these years. Not in this condition. It was a small velvet pouch, deep blue, still soft, still clean. Untouched by time in a way that made Priscilla's breath slow. Someone had placed it there with care. Someone who wanted it hidden but safe. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a turquoise pendant shaped like a thin lightning bolt. The stone gleamed under the fluorescent lights, as if holding its own quiet glow. It was smooth, cool, perfectly polished. But what stunned her wasn't the pendant itself. It was the note tied to it. A tiny slip of paper, folded twice, edges worn but writing still sharp. It's finally time. I'll be waiting. Priscilla stared at the words until they blurred. Time for what? Waiting where? Why would someone send Elvis a message like this? And why so close to the day he died? The ache behind her ribs returned, heavier this time. Elvis had worn symbols before, crosses, crescents, TCB lightning bolts, but this felt different. Intimate, personal, carried a meaning he didn't share with anyone. She held the pendant up. The shape was unmistakable. A lightning bolt, but not his TCB symbol. This one was narrower, almost ancient in its simplicity. A traditional pattern found in old Southwestern art. A sign of protection, renewal, and starting over. Renewal. The word wrapped itself around her heart. Was that what Elvis wanted? A reset? A breath of fresh air before the world swallowed him whole again? She whispered the question aloud without meaning to. If he'd made that flight, would things have been different? The pendant felt heavier now, like a promise, like a path he never got to walk. Priscilla flipped the note over, searching for more writing. But there was nothing. Only the faint imprint of someone's fingers pressing the paper long ago. She remembered Elvis in the summer of 1977. Tired but restless, quiet but full of strange energy. He moved through Graceland like a man caught between two worlds. One weighed down by duty and expectation, the other whispering for peace. And suddenly, Santa Fe didn't feel random anymore. She placed the pendant in her palm, and a memory surfaced. Something Elvis once told her late at night, when the world was asleep and the house felt like a safe place to be honest. Sometimes, he said, a man needs somewhere quiet to hear his own thoughts. Somewhere nobody knows him. Somewhere nobody knows him. Santa Fe fit that perfectly. She picked up the envelope the pendant came in. The postmark read August 10th, 1977, just a week before he died. The handwriting was the same as the letter Charlie described. Small, delicate, confident. Priscilla swallowed hard. Whoever wrote this note wasn't a stranger. Not to Elvis. Not to the Elvis who longed for escape, healing, silence. As she studied the loops and curves of the handwriting, something tugged at the back of her mind. A memory from years ago, vague yet persistent, like a whisper repeating itself. A woman's voice, a brief meeting, a road trip in 1968. A conversation Elvis once described as the most peaceful talk I ever had. Could it be her? Priscilla pressed her fingertips against her lips, fighting the tremor in her chest. The pendant, the note, the flight, none of them were coincidences. They were connected. They pointed to someone who mattered. Someone Elvis trusted in a way he rarely trusted anyone outside his circle. Someone he planned to see again. She looked once more at the note taped to the pendant. It's finally time. I'll be waiting. Time for what? A reunion? A healing session? A confession? The questions circled her mind like a quiet storm. But deep down, she knew the truth was about to lead her somewhere unexpected. Somewhere tied to a single moment Elvis rarely spoke about. Because the handwriting on that note wasn't unfamiliar. Not to her. Not anymore. Priscilla realizes the pendant connects Elvis to someone he'd met years before. Priscilla set the pendant gently on the table, as if it were a fragile piece of Elvis's voice she didn't want to break. Her mind drifted back to that moment, that faint memory of 1968 she couldn't ignore anymore. It was late spring, after one of Elvis's long drives through the Southwest. He came back calm in a way she rarely saw in those days. His shoulders loose, his voice soft. The world didn't feel heavy on him, not that night. He told her about a woman he'd met at a small road stop near Santa Fe. Quiet place, a dusty parking lot, a simple wooden building with hand-painted signs. Her name was Dr. Margaret Hale. Not a romantic figure, not a fan, not someone chasing his fame. She was a counselor, a spiritual one. Someone who worked with veterans, burned-out musicians, anyone carrying wounds people couldn't see. Elvis said she spoke in a calm way, slow and steady, like she understood how noise breaks a person down. Priscilla remembered him saying, "She listens without trying to fix you." Back then, she didn't think much of it. Elvis had small moments like that with strangers from time to time, quick sparks of connection that faded as fast as they appeared. But now, with the pendant, the ticket, the letter, it didn't feel like a fading spark. It felt like a circle closing. She opened the journal again, scanning the pages around that July entry. Only a few words stood out, but they were enough. Talk to M again. She says there's still time. Quiet place. Santa Fe. Priscilla's pulse quickened. Margaret. She turned the page slowly, afraid to rush and miss something important. The paper crackled softly, like a whisper from the past. Another line stopped her cold. Need to breathe. Need space. Need help. Her throat tightened. It was rare for Elvis to admit he needed help, even to himself. The world saw him as invincible, larger than life. But inside, he carried invisible weights, pulling him in directions no one else noticed until it was too late. Had he reached out to Margaret again? Had he spoken with her during those last difficult weeks? She flipped another page. A small taped note slipped out, one that must have been tucked between the journals for decades. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. A phone number. A Santa Fe area code. Nothing more. Priscilla swallowed hard. Santa Fe wasn't random. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't a desperate escape. It was a plan. A quiet plan to meet someone who knew how to guide him through the chaos he could never fully escape. Someone who had once given him peace. Real peace. The kind he couldn't buy, couldn't perform, couldn't fake. She reached for the pendant again. Its surface was warm now, from her hands or from something deeper. She didn't know. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret had meant more to Elvis than anyone realized. Not as a lover, not as a secret relationship, but as someone who saw the human part of him without the noise. A sudden thought hit her, sharp, painful. If he had made that flight, would he have lived longer? Would someone like Margaret have reached him before the world consumed him again? She closed her eyes, letting the question settle. Sometimes the hardest questions are the ones without answers. But one thing was clear. Elvis wasn't planning to run away. He was planning to heal. And Santa Fe was the doorway. She turned back to the journal. At the bottom of the last page he wrote in 1977. She saw a final line. Faint, almost erased. If I can get quiet again, I can come back. Her breath stopped. This wasn't about leaving everything behind. It was about rebuilding, restoring, becoming himself again. The pendant, the letter, the phone number, they formed a path he had been trying to follow. But before she could look deeper into the pages, something else caught her eye. Tucked beneath the journal, almost hidden under the flap of the box. It wasn't paper. It wasn't jewelry. It was something that didn't belong in a storage room at all. A tiny cassette tape. But the final clue doesn't come from a letter. It comes from a voice recording. Priscilla held the tiny cassette between her fingers, stunned by how light it felt. Something so small, yet powerful enough to change the way she saw Elvis's final days. The label was handwritten in his shaky 1977 script, Santa Fe, don't lose. Her breath caught. He had written those words himself. The tape was old, the plastic slightly cracked, the reel inside stiff from time. It hadn't been played in decades, maybe not since the week he recorded it. She walked across the archive room, searching for a player, until she spotted a dusty portable recorder on the top shelf. One of the old models he used for song ideas. She placed the tape inside. Her hand hovered over the play button. What if these were his last private thoughts? What if this was the one part of him no one was ever meant to hear? But the truth was bigger than the fear. She needed to understand. Needed to see the man behind the legend. Not the shadow left behind by the crowds, the expectations, the pressure. She pressed play. A soft hiss filled the room. Then silence. Then his voice. Quiet. Breathless. Human. Hey! He whispered. Almost like he was speaking to himself. If this tape ever plays, I guess things didn't go as planned. Priscilla pressed a hand to her mouth. Her knees felt weak. Elvis continued, his voice shaky but honest. I booked the flight. Santa Fe. August 17th. I thought, maybe if I got some air, some quiet, I could get myself back together. The silence that followed felt thick, heavy, like the world paused to listen. He spoke again. People think I'm made of stone, that I can't break. But I'm tired, honey. I'm tired of not breathing right. Tired of rooms full of people but feeling alone. Priscilla felt tears burn at the edges of her eyes. On the tape, Elvis exhaled. A long, shaky breath, the kind a person lets out when they finally admit the truth to themselves. Margaret says there's still hope, says I can start over, even at 42. A soft, broken laugh slipped from him. 42. Funny how old that feels. The recorder clicked softly as the tape shifted. Then came the next words, words that tightened Priscilla's chest. If this plane leaves, maybe I'll get my life back. Maybe I'll get to heal. Maybe I'll learn how to breathe again. A long pause stretched across the room. Priscilla could hear him swallow, hear the tremble in his voice. I just need one more chance at quiet. One more chance to be me. The tape ended with a soft click. No goodbye. No final message. Just silence. The stillness in the archive room wrapped around her, thick and full of emotion. She felt the weight of what he'd carried. The invisible battles, the desperate search for peace, the hope he barely managed to hold on to. Santa Fe wasn't a mystery anymore. It was hope, a final attempt at healing, a chance he never got to take. Priscilla closed her eyes, replaying his voice in her mind, soft, tired, but full of a fragile kind of courage. And in that moment, she knew. She couldn't keep the story hidden forever. The world deserved to know why Elvis chose Santa Fe. Priscilla sat alone in the archive room, the tape recorder still humming softly beside her. The pendant, the flight ticket, the journal, the letter, all of them formed a picture she had never seen before. Not of Elvis the icon, not of Elvis the legend, but of Elvis the man. A man searching for a quiet corner of the world. A man who still believed he could rebuild himself. A man who reached for help in the last weeks of his life, even when the world thought he had everything. She gathered the items carefully, placing each one back into the box. Not to hide them, but to protect them. These weren't secrets. They were pieces of a truth he never got to finish. A truth no tabloid ever cared to understand. When she stood, her legs felt heavy, her heart even heavier, but her mind was clear. Elvis didn't plan to disappear. He planned to heal. That single realization changed everything she thought she knew about his final hours. He wasn't giving up. He wasn't retreating. He was reaching for something better. Something quieter, softer, safer. And Santa Fe wasn't some mysterious destination. It was the place he believed hope was waiting. Years later, when she finally shared the story, she did it gently. Not as gossip, not as drama, but as a reminder. A reminder that even legends carry burdens, and even the strongest people look for help in the shadows of their lives. A small plaque now sits inside Graceland's private archive room. It reads, "The journey he never got to take." And every time visitors pass by, they pause, not in sadness, but in understanding. Because this story isn't about loss. It's about the hope he held onto until the very end. If this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes legends don't struggle like the rest of us. And before you go, tell us in the comments, what do you think Elvis was hoping to find in Santa Fe? Your voice keeps these forgotten stories alive. Watch the next episode.